accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will meet with the Brownsville Public Utilities Board on Monday, September 12, 2011, at 11:30 a.m. at the Commission Chambers on the second floor of the Brownsville City Hall Federal Building located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street, Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas. The pledge?
Yeah, we can do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Mayor? Mayor,
Go ahead, Brad. I'm sorry.
let's all pray. Father God, we thank you so much for blessing our nation and protecting it since the 9/11 events 10 years ago. Lord, we ask you to continue to heal those people who lost loved ones, continue to protect and bless our servicemen around the world, and help us to remember what you said in your word in Isaiah. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Though the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, nor the flame burn you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. And Lord, for this meeting today, I ask you to continue to bring our city into unity, lead and guide each of the leaders before us. Help us to come into agreement that will be good for the city of Brownsville. Bless and lead and guide each one of them. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Item 1, discussion and possible action regarding the debt overview for the city of Brownsville and the Brownsville Public Utilities Board.
Okay, that's Pete.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Commission, as the Brownsville Public Utilities Board. I'm going to have Noé cover part of this, and if I need to, I can certainly continue with the presentation. Mr. Noé Hinojosa is both our financial advisors for the POB and the city.
Welcome, Mr. Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Pete. My name is Noé Hinojosa with the Star Hinojosa and Company. We serve the city and the utility company as financial advisor. With me is one of my partners, Jorge Garza. Jorge, you could say, was one of the fellows who created back in the 80s when he was with another firm, PUB. Both him and I are from the Valley. I'm from Brownsville. He's from sometime north, a little north from here. But in any event, our objective today, as led by and instructed by the mayor, is to give you an overview from a macro perspective of how the city is positioned to deal with debt, how the PUB is positioned to deal with debt, how between the two of them a great partnership is needed so that we can carry the city's challenges forward. I think we'll be remiss if we didn't share with those who work with the PUB if not for the PUB, the city wouldn't be in a position that it's in, because I think it is a good partnership that makes things go well, whether it's a private business or a public business. This is a public business. Our objective is, again, to tell some of the new members of the commission who may not have met in the past, how is it that city finances work and how PUB finances work, so that when you hear from others that may not be as keenly aware as we are, that in essence it takes a little bit of both of you to be able to carry forward a very complex political system. First and foremost, one of the things that we do for the city from time to time is to come out and borrow for projects, whether for streets, libraries, and even police cars and fire cars and all that. But we also help the system in going about funding for projects related to electricity, water, and sewer. For some of you who are city commissioners, the Public Utility Board, you could say, is sort of an enterprise system that basically you appoint people to run it for you. And the people that run it for you are here at the same table with you. In fact, the city commission is only empowered over PUB on 3 matters. One is, appointing people. 2, authorize any time that the system goes about borrowing money, they cannot do it independent of you. They must come to you to borrow for those proceeds in order for them to make those improvements. So they're not arbitrary. They can't just go on their own and borrow money and for that matter, commit the city on your behalf. Only you, the city commissioners, can do that. And then the third thing that you do for them is basically allow them to raise rates or adjust rates. The rates that they impose on the user, on the payer, is imposed at the end of the day by you, the commissioners, and does what the board does for you is work with a very competent staff to be able to determine what those rates should be. And then once they feel comfortable, they come to you with a recommendation to help them and raise those rates. I'm going to there's a page in this document that I think we put together for you that will give you a little bit of the history of how you or previous commissions have supported the PUB. The very first, the first page after the cover, next page with the graph. Basically, here's on the left is a debt overview. Many people from time to time have come to this commission, have come to the PUB and confronted them with we have all this debt, how are you paying for this debt, and so on and so forth. What you have on the left-hand side is basically the total par amount outstanding of the city of Brownsville. And what that shows you on the left-hand side is that the city has about $176 million of that debt. Now, that debt is made out of through 3 types of debt. You have general obligation debt, which is basically the kind of debt that when a lawyer interprets that commitment by the city, that's what we call in our business an unlimited tax obligation. It's an obligation that has the full faith and credit of the city. The next one, the certificates of obligation, which at times has been challenged to the city when they go about issuing this debt. It's about $60 million, as you can see up there. It's perceived by the investor as a limited tax obligation. It doesn't have the full faith and credit. It's just a limited tax obligation. But for all practical purposes, when a buyer buys a City of Brownsville debt instrument, they know that they have the full faith and credit. Then the last piece about sales tax revenue debt, about $17.5 million. That was an offering that was done by the city years back, about 3 or 4, to do a portion or fund a portion of the sports complex. And that is paid exclusively by a portion of a half a cent sales tax that is collected by the city. In fact, it is important to note that at the bottom there's some footnotes in there in little letters, and that was not our intent, but basically that's what that is. And that in number 1, the very number 1 footnote is that most of your debt, as it is reflected on that quadrant, that square on the left-hand side, you see there's bars. There's a blue bar, there's a gray bar, and sort of a little purple bar. And then you have this red line that goes across from left to right. What the blue bar is that that's your general obligation debt. Think of it like this. You got 3 types of mortgages. You got 3 homes. The blue is your main home. The gray is the second home. And the third is another home you have out there. And the red line is your tax levy. For some of you who sit on the city commission, when you impose a tax rate, if you recall, you impose a tax rate that is made out of operating budget tax and your interest and sinking fund tax. Well, that red line, when you impose that tax rate from tax values, that red line is your tax levy. So as you see the red line go across, you're going from year 2011 to year 2030, thereabouts, my eyes are 2031. You see how there's really no bars out there. There are no bars, blue bars, gray bars, or purple bars that hit that red line. What does that mean? That means that if you don't borrow any money in years to come, in the future, then the red line will have to be decreased, because that's just the way our business operates. If you don't have mortgage payments to be made, then you're not required to impose that type of a tax rate. Well, what happens? Well, the city is not going to stop from growing. The city is not going to stop from existence. So what you do is you use that red line as a way to keep you from, or actually allow you to do more borrowing as long as you don't bust through that red line. Because if you bust through the red line, then that hurts your total tax rate, in that you either have to cut on the M&O or have to raise the total tax rate, because the INS needs to help. So if you look at that red line and you look at the bars, the blue and the gray line, that's basically paid by property taxes. The purple line is paid more by other funds that come from outside of general fund revenues, such as sales tax, such as transfers from other enterprise funds, not from PUB, by the way. PUB does not pay for any of the debt issued by the city. So what we see there is that in 2012 and 13, there's a little drop of the blue and the gray bar that gives you pretty much an ability to borrow maybe $2 or $3 million next year. Well, the city doesn't need $2 or $3 million a year to do things like streets or whatever, or parks. It probably needs more. But what we have been subjected as a city is, over the last 5 years, is to work within whatever that red line gives me capacity for. So we don't have a comprehensive capital improvement plan like the PUB does have. The PUB has a 10-year plan. The city back in the early 90s used to have a CIP. Today we don't have a CIP. And what a CIP is in essence a management tool very similar to the budget that allows the investor who buys or who lends you money to go out and do your projects to have a predisposed knowledge of what it is that you may need in the future as it pertains to long-term range plans and projects. So when you look at the left square, at the bottom, we see these ratings. And the ratings of Moody's is a AA3. S&P is Standard & Poor's, the very infamous Standard & Poor's that just downgraded our country about 2 weeks ago from a AAA to a AA. And then Fitch is a AA minus. And what those ratings basically show you is that whenever we go as a city and borrow money in the open markets, that AA3 and an A plus and AA minus is a third party's opinion of how good of a credit you really are. So look at it this way. If you and I go to a local bank and we want to buy a house or we want to buy a car, that loan officer, and some of you are bankers in this table, will have an opinion of what your credit is versus my credit. And it's based on what? It's based on income, it's based on education, it's based on all various factors. But in any event, you'll see that the ratings for the city are actually greater than the PUBs. When you go over to the right-hand side, you'll see that the city's PUB system is A2, A plus, and A. That's about a notch to 2 notches below the city of Brownsville's. In fact, if you look at the Moody's, for example, they're a AA3. The highest attainable rating is a AAA. Below AAA is a AA1, then a AA2, and then a AA3, and then an A1, A2, A3, and so on and so forth. Well, the PUB system is an A2. Basically, if today the city were to go out and borrow money, $10 million, let's say, you probably get a rate of 4.1%. If PUB were to go and borrow money, they'll go borrow money probably at a 4.3%. Well, when you see that 20 basis point differential on $10 million, it's probably about $200,000 a year. And I'm making up these numbers as I'm speaking, so for some of you who are bankers and you think I get off with these numbers, please feel free to correct me. But anyway, $200,000 a year is what it costs more for PUB to finance their projects versus you. And you say, why? Well, because the way you go about borrowing for your money, you have property taxes. You very much have the full value, the full moral support of the city to go borrow money. In their case, they don't. They have to demonstrate that historically, not proactively, historically, they have had the ability to generate revenues to pay for expenses, and then what is net of that, they use what you and I may call profit, they use that profit, quote unquote, to pay the debt. So they have to do it historically. So when you go over to the right-hand side and you go for at the very top, Brownsville PUB, their debt outstanding is $319 million. People say, wow, they got two times more debt than we do. Why is that? Well, what they do, different than you is they go buy assets, big assets. They have electric plants, they have water treatment plants, they have sewer treatment plants. So basically, when they go about borrowing money, that debt is not tangible. I mean, it is tangible in terms of the debt is out there, it is liquid, but they have assets to support that debt. And in fact, today, the system has assets that are worth about $650 million. I think probably more. I think
It's
about
800, 800, over 800.
800. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's say that it's 800 million, and they got $390 million. What does that mean to you as an investor of the PUB? Is that you have an asset, a system that is worth 800 million, but you only have 320 million of debt outstanding. That's a great deal for the taxpayer. What's even better, and we're going to show you through this presentation later, is that it makes your city more competitive in that when you look at the water, the sewer, and the electricity rates that you charge on the user, whether it's a residential customer or an industrial customer, your rates are very competitive. So it's important for you to know that as a commissioner, as a policymaker, to understand how this debt really works and what it really means to you, and most importantly, what it means to your customer, which is the taxpayer. So in essence, when you look at the bars, at their bars versus our bars, remember, our bars are basically bars that are controlled by that tax levy. On their side, they're not controlled by tax levy. They're controlled by revenue-generating assets. So when you look at the right-hand side, their bars go further out than your bars. They go out to 2031 pretty consistently. Today, if your mortgage payment at the city is about $15 million, their mortgage payment at the PUB is about $22 million. Their mortgage payment at the city is $22 million, not over the next 5 years, is over the next 25 years. So that's what you need to be aware of, and that's okay. The rating agencies, when they look at your system and the way you go about funding for those improvements, feel very comfortable that the rating you have of an A2, that is not a very low-end type of an investment grade rating. That's actually a very good rating. The lowest rating you can get is a triple B minus in the case of S&P and a Baa3 in the case of Moody's. You're way over that. You're about 5 or 6 notches higher than they are. In 2005, the PUB, I believe, had ratings in the Baa1 category. And when we did a massive restructuring to basically, and I'll take you to the next page. How does this work? On the next page, you'll see this pie chart. And on this pie chart, you'll see that on the right-hand side, the PUB, you have 3 types of debt. Remember, we talked about this, the senior lien debt. I didn't talk about that. Senior lien debt, junior lien debt, and commercial paper. Senior lien debt basically is an acronym that we use in our system or in our industry. When we sell revenue bonds, contrary to city bonds with GO bonds, when we sell bonds at the city commission, all we have to demonstrate to the investor is that you tax levy whatever dollar we collect, we can incur $1 of a mortgage payment. In the case of the city PUB system, we cannot do that because they operate on revenues that are unpredictable. A lot of these revenues that the system generates are seasonal. Like I think this year, Mr. Chairman, we're going to have probably one of the better years we ever had. It's not good necessarily for the environment, but we have had a very dry and sunny summer. So that means we're going to have a lot of water sold, and that's going to reflect in better revenues. But in essence, the PUB, when they go to the market, they have to have what we call in our business a coverage. For every dollar they incurred in debt, they got to generate $1.25 to pay $1 of mortgage payment. At the city commission, we don't have to do that. Why? Because the city commission borrows money with the full faith and credit of the taxpayer. And that's when you go over to the left-hand side and you see how is the debt of the city paid. It's paid with general obligations, paid with COs, and it's most importantly, paid with that little, you see at the bottom I have a debt service security. The security, the formal repayment or the guarantee to repay those bonds is with 27 cents of an interest and sinking fund tax rate. I think today, the city has a 65-cent property tax rate. Well, 27 cents is for INS, 47 cents, or 48 cents for that matter, is for M&O to operate your budget. The sales tax, a half a penny, that's what supports your sales tax revenue bonds. And I can tell you that that's revenue bond is very well supported, so we're in good shape there. On the right-hand side, it's not as easy to borrow for, again, it's not as easy to borrow through GOs or COs as it is for the PUB system. The PUB system is subjected to some very stringent credit standards that they expect not only their policymakers to understand that, or their staff, they actually expect the parent company, meaning the city, to know that if you are not very sure or certain of supporting that system in the goods and in the bad times, they can come and punish you by reducing your your credit ratings. And when that happens, your cost of borrowing is higher. That's why when people said, why did the U.S. government got so offended by going from a AAA to a AA? Well, because now in the future, from here on, anytime that the U.S. government borrows money, it's going to have to borrow at a higher rate. And that's the same thing with the PUB, in that you have to support, as a city commission, support the PUB board, because if they don't get what they need from you, it's going to be more difficult for them, more challenging to do their projects. So what's important to note on the right-hand side, basically, is that if you look at the bottom part, debt service securities, net revenues of the system are $52 million. The budgeted number, and you can circle that, it shows $39 million. And this is the time of the year where things get really hairy at every city across the country, in that you have to adopt a budget by law. In some cities, you have to adopt a balanced budget. Some states are required to have a balanced budget. Well, what makes it a little different or a little difficult at the local level is that you're right in touch with the grassroots, and you have a staff and consultants like ourselves who are constantly wrestling over the fact that, how do I budget? What do I give you as a policymaker? What do I give you as a budget? Do I give you a very tight budget? Do I give you a very generous budget? Well, you're going to find that staff people will do a good job of being conservative. We have to be conservative because a lot of times we don't know what that next year is going to be like. And thus I can tell you that, and I'm going to show you in the next page here, that historically the city and the PUB are very good about adopting budgets that are conservative. So that at the end of the year, we end up okay. So I don't want to alarm you as policymakers that, oh, the sky is falling, although this time of the year, things do appear like they are. And I can tell you that in 2008, when we had economic conditions that were very uncertain, and they continue to be uncertain for some of us who are bankers, we just don't know what the future holds. What we do know is that the future is a heck of a lot more uncertain than it used to be. You're going to find on page 4 is a summary that we put for your benefit in a very, I guess, reduced perspective, how the city and how the PUB work with each other. I think it's important to note, and you can circle this, the very first column on the left, fiscal year 2008. Look at the total revenues. At the top quadrant is the city of Brownsville's operating budget. The bottom quadrant is the city's of Brownsville's PUB operating budget. There's a red line in there, or numbers in red. Those are numbers that come from the transfers that the PUB passes on to the city on an annual basis. So basically, and by the way, this is a workshop. There are no actions required after this meeting. We're not going to test or quiz each other. It's more of an educational meeting. I think in order for you to make good policy decisions, the mayor instructed us, I want you to come in here and give us a good overview of how we work together so that we can minimize the political contents that sometimes go with making these decisions. So basically, what we do here, in 08, you'll find that the total revenues for the city back in 08 were $87 million. And we spent, at the city, $83 million. And basically, we had an increase of revenues or expenditures of $3.9 million, but we had transfers out of about $3.1 million. In the end, what's important to the rating agencies is that What's important to the rating agencies is how good is the bottom line. You all heard about the concept or the term of bottom line. The bottom line there in '08 was $18.5 million. That's your savings account. That is very important to Mr. Gonzalez, has always been. It's very important to us because when we go sell the credits of the city, we need to tell the investor that in case we deal with an act of God or something that was totally unpredictable, a lawsuit or whatever, that we have that savings accounts well in place. And $18.5 million at the time were about 25% of expenses. If you're spending $83 million and you got about $18.5 million in savings, it's about 20 to 25% in that range. Well, the more savings you have in there, the better off you are. I represent the city of Dallas. City of Dallas, we have about $1.5 billion budget, and their fund balance about $80 or $90 million. I said, wow. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a requirement from the state for emergency management purposes as far as percentage of other people?
No, there is not. This is not by the way, this is contrary to what some of the legal profession people may say. I'm working from a credit perspective. It has nothing to do with the law. We operate very differently. You may have all this legal contracts with me. At the end of the day, we expect will and ability for you to pay me back. I'm not going on what the legal, I do go by what the legal contracts say, but those legal contracts may be even more liberal than what a credit. If you just look at it this way, Commissioner, if you were going to the bank is going to have you sign some documents, but the banker who's approving your loan, he's going to make very certain that your income is much higher than what your obligations are on a current basis. So it has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with credit standards. And the credit standards are not made up overnight. Credit standards are made over decades of history. So when I tell you about the city of Brownsville's credit rating, the reason why you're such a strong credit rating, because you're a strong credit rating, is because of that bottom line, that fund balance. Normally, you'll see cities have a fund balance. I mean, I pointed out Dallas, but that was not a very good example because they're a AA credit. They used to be a AAA credit. But most of the cities in Texas of good credit have fund balances of 20 to 25% in there. When you look at 2008, look at that bottom line all the way across to 2012 and how the staff has presented to you a fund balance of $10.6 million. So over 5 years, you've eroded $8 million according to this budget that is being presented to the commission. Well, you and I know, as I said earlier, the budget is a management tool. In fact, if you look at the numbers a little closer, you're going to find that 2011, although it says actual at the top, that's more of an estimate. It's not an actual. We don't have an actual until the CAFR, until the audit is presented to you sometime in February of 2011. And by the way, 2012, that's what makes it very difficult for some of you policymakers too, in that you have an ongoing year, all these revenues are coming in, but we don't have a machine that keeps an eye on all those dollars coming in day in and during the night. We have to take time and make sure that we are accounting to you and to the taxpayer properly. So it takes what is by statute. We got to have an audit 6 months after the fiscal year ends. And for some of you who are new in the commission, the fiscal year ends both at the city and at the Public Utility Board on September 30th. Every September 30th, that's when we close the books. And that's when we have to go and account, not only to you, the policymakers, but to the taxpayer on how is it the city did. What's important, again, from a big perspective, a big picture perspective, is that the bottom line, $18.5 million, in the eyes of the fellow who's putting an opinion, the guy that is going to say, how good is Brownsville, a lot of it is based on that number. If that number drops, then you get a little bit more of a punishment by the rating agencies. And I guess in 2011, look at 2011. 2011, according to this actual or this estimates on the city, are lower than 2008. We are very comfortable, and I'm telling you this as I sit on this podium or stand on this podium, that you're going to be fine this year in 11. You're going to be fine in terms of revenues. I think the revenues are going to be shy of $87 million, Pete, but it shows 82. But if you look at it, look at the red line in there. It says $8,650,000 coming from PUB. If you look at that number and look at the bottom number, the bottom side in that column, that's PUB. It says $10,000,009. $10,000,009 is what the PUB has budgeted to transfer to you, or expects. Not, they didn't budget. That's what they expect to give you. The city works with a budget that doesn't work on the dot, doesn't work by the minute or on the second. So there are differences in timing. What's expected? Go ahead. Yes, sir. Basically, the $10,000,009, we feel confident at PUB staff level that the city's going to get that. So if you get that, that's about $2,000,003 more. And then on the other PUB, there's a little line item in black, in bold. This is something that the commission went to the PUB board 2 or 3 years ago, and we asked the PUB to make an extraordinary consideration for an economic assistance. We did not know at the time how much sales tax was going to get hit, and we didn't know how much the bridge revenues were going to get hit. So we asked them to give us, or to put in their budget, $3 million. They did. That's what that other PUB transfer is, $3 million. Now, look at the red line, $11,600,000 in 2010 versus $10,500,000 in 2009. The big increase, $1.5 million, although in this case it's about $1 million, $1.5 million of that red number was a lawsuit that PUB was successful in receiving. They got a claim or they settled for about $15 million. The city got 10% of the $15 million, which is $1.5 million, and that's why the number was there. So 2010 was an extraordinary year from the way the PUB helped the city commission, okay? So when you look at 2011, we're looking at a number of $1,875,000. Well, the city will be getting from PUB $2.5 million. And that's, again, on a economic assistance grant, you could say, coming from PUB to the city. Initially, when this occurred, it occurred based on our counts, on our advice to the city and to PUB about this economic assistance. We did not know what the sales tax was going to be, and we didn't know what bridge revenues were going to be. And that's why PUB conceded to giving out this money. Because by law, by contract, commissioners, the only thing that we are entitled to is that red line. We're not entitled from PUB for anything other than that red line. And that red line, if you go back to the bottom of Brownsville PUB, you see there's a number, or there's a line called adjusted gross revenues, right over a line called total operating and maintenance expenses. It says adjusted gross revenues. What that adjusted gross revenues is a number that comes from the top after taking expenses associated with what it takes to run electric plants, water plants, sewer plants, whatever, but mostly electric plants. In that, a lot of the plants that we have out there, I believe we have 5 or 6, don't we? About 6 of them, Fernando? They operate on coal, they operate on gas, diesel. So all those costs associated with running those machines, we have to pay for. And thus, it would not be a fair agreement for the investor who understands what the city is entitled legally to receive from PUB. And that is that today, the city gets from PUB on a legal basis 10% of that adjusted gross revenues. So when you look at that line across from 08 through 12, you'll see that 119 is 10% of that is the number 11.94672 in the case of 08. If you go to 11 shows 10,924,977 going to the city, and a portion of that number is based up, or that 10% of that number is from the adjusted gross revenues. Now, the city doesn't get the cash, $10,000,009 necessarily. There's a line below the red line on the PUB budget at the bottom side. You see where it says less COB usage? If you go to 2011, the number expected there is 10,924,000, and right below that, it shows 4,300,000. That's what it takes, or that's what the PUB charges the city for running the lights all across the city, buildings like this, being air conditioned the way it is. This PUB basically charges the city back. It's not free. Electricity is not free to the citizens or to the city for that matter. The bondholder is very, very adamant and very stringent about what's in there. People have said in the past, well, why don't we make that 10% to a 14%? Or even 50. I think in the previous commission, I think I was told and pretty much threatened about, hey, we got to get more than 15%. I said, well, you know, there are cities like San Antonio today. City of San Antonio gets 14% from its equivalent to the PUB. It's called the City Public Service. City Public Service is a system that has $2.1 billion in revenues. So just think about it. 14% of 2.1 is a lot of money. It's like $300 million thereabouts, I think. Well, that's what the city gets from its CPS, from its PUB. Well, the CPS system is much more diverse in that it's much greater from a credit standpoint. The tolerance from an investor to lending CPS is much greater because you are a smaller system. So it's kind of like this. My son is 18 years old, and well, I won't tell you that, but I just turned 50. But anyway, if I go to the banker is going to lend me money at a better rate, I think, Mr. Navera, than my son. Hopefully. So basically, here is the same thing. CPS is a much greater system than PUB is. So when we did the major restructuring back in 2005, and personally, I advised the city and the PUB then to put a 10%, not a 14%. It was based on that. It was based on the fact that I didn't have a real good feel for how the 10% was going to be in comparison to previous transfers of the city or from the PUB to the city. In fact, if you go to the next page, page 5, look at the history going back to 1998 to today. This is money. This is cash that has come from the PUB over to the city. In 1998, the numbers were $5,249,000. If you take the third column from left to right, is the city of Brownsville usage. That was the money that the city will pay for the use of electricity. And there you find $2,245,000 was what the city will have to pay the PUB. And the difference between that is the cash, which was basically $3 million. So the city will get $3 million. That was back in 98. In 2005, look at that number. In fact, in 98 through 2004, it was at about $3 million, pretty steady. But when we did the major restructuring, it went from $3.5 million to $7.5 million, or $7 million, yeah, $7.3 million, I'm sorry. And then it stayed in that range, $7 million to $6 million. If we would have gone from 10% to 14%, that number would have been much greater. What does that mean? What that means is that you're reallocating now risks between running a system, a PUB system, to the investor who's lending you the money to run the system. And I don't think, to be honest with you, when you make shifts of risks, the investor doesn't want to be with the greater risks. The risk is always have to be on the fellow who's running the system. And thus, when I said 10% and not 14%, because I wanted to see how this system was going to react to changes in the law. At that time, we were dealing with deregulation, right, John? And things of that nature. Congress was talking about, we're going to abolish municipally owned utility companies and so on and so forth. We've got to make this system more competitive. So we're being very, very careful. Careful in the sense that we didn't want to take too much from PUB because we want the golden goose to continue to run for us. And it's run really well, remarkably well. If you look at those revenues, I mean, fellas, I mean, we're going from $3.5 million to now about $7.5 million in 2010. And I think that number is going to be now $6.6 million. And then from time to time, if we feel we are in a bind, let's go get some assistance from time to time, but you can't do it, and you can't expect to get it year after year after year after year, because now you're taking away from the investor on the component. And that's where we are today, that the city comes to you, the city staff comes to the city commission with a budget, and then the PUB has to do their budget. In fact, I think their budget is tonight. And I think that what's of concern to all of us is that making a decision, when the city commission makes a decision versus the PUB board making a decision, it's pretty much written in stone. And the way you go about making a decision is based on a number of factors. There are a lot of people here on this, including ourselves, who rely on your actions. We only get paid when you borrow money at the city commission. The PUB doesn't pay us only when they borrow money. They pay us actually on a retainer. There are many people here, including staff, most importantly staff, who are going to be affected one way or the other on how a decision is made by you. And our interest is to make a decision based on knowledge, based on seeing the big picture. And thus, that was our intent today. That's what the mayor wanted to impress upon you. The mayor is the only representative of the commission on the PUB board. Well, the mayor, like all mayors, have a variety of other pressures in the community, so they can meet with you on a daily basis to tell you, here's what I'm doing at the PUB. So it's important for you as commissioners to understand what the mayor sees over there and then support him when he comes to you with what he sees PUB needs help with. So in essence, our objective today is to give you this big picture, how this whole thing looks. What I want to share with you, most importantly, is that the city has gotten great benefit from its PUB system and will continue to have great benefit from its system as you go about supporting them for what they need. And what they need, if you go over to the next page, on page 6, this is basically a 5-year capital improvement plan. At the top, the City of Brownsville 5-year CIP, I make a statement there that the City of Brownsville currently has no capital improvements plan. And by the way, a city rated at your level is expected to have a CIP. You're expected to have some kind of an idea as to what it is where you see needs are needed. I mean, whether you have a park need, whether you have a library need, tell me at least 3 years in advance that on year 3, you're going to need something. Well, today, we're sort of in a reactive mood, way. We only fund for CIP when you go back to the page 2. Basically, if you just go quickly to page 2, that red line, the difference between the red line and the bars between the blue and the gray on the city side of the square, that's where the capacity is to do CIP projects. Unless what? Unless 2 things happen. Unless property values grow or you raise taxes. So as you can see, that red line gives you not much capacity. You're pretty much at the hilt. In fact, if you look at column 2017, you actually bust through the red line. Well, we know that in advance. As the debt management portfolio manager for the city, we know that today you can get, and we're going to present this to the commission in the next week or so, you're going to, and I'm speaking out of my memory here, but you have an opportunity to refinance some currently outstanding bonds, and I'm going to put the number at a 5%, and you can probably refinance them at a 3%. $18 million will give us $1 million in savings. Well, we're going to put the $1 million in savings in that column so that you always stay inside the levy, inside the tax levy. The rating agencies will know that. They know it today that you have that benefit. So when we drop that, when we bring that savings, we're going to drop that bar, and you'll be inside the tax levy. That gives you that AA credit. So going back to the CIP, on page 6, on page 6, the PUB doesn't have a 5-year CIP. The PUB has a 10-year CIP. If you look at, there are 4 rows on the left-hand side, or 4 rows: electric, water, sewer, and the total. Then there are 4 columns: debt, cash, grant money, and total. On electric, the city PUB expects to make $99 million in improvements over the next 5 years. it expects to make about $23 million in improvements on water and about $80 million on sewer. That's what it needs to keep this machine going. And the way they're gonna go about doing it is they do it through debt, they do it with cash, and they do it with a grant money. The grant money is very likely coming from either EPA or the Texas Water Development Board. Now, the cash, look at $70 million. People always said to me, how is it that the PUB runs so much? How can they pay for cash for some other projects? Remember when I said to you, when you borrow money for the PUB, you gotta have a coverage component. For every dollar of their mortgage payment, they gotta cover it $1.25. Well, if you go to page 4, you'll see in there, on page 4, there is the third line from the bottom to the top on the PUB side. The very bottom line, the bottom line for PUB is not the same bottom line for you. The bottom line for PUB is basically the transfers to the city, but above that, there's a little component that has an X. It's the fourth line, I think. Debt service coverage ratio. In 08, it was 306, and then all across is 229 in 11. 2012, it's budgeted at 173. Well, remember when I said to you about a dollar being covered with 1.25? Well, as that number fluctuates between the 2 and 2.5%, the PUB is going to have those ratings of the A category. If it drops below the 2%, guess what? You're going to get slammed and you're going to become a BBB credit. So when somebody says to me, what does the legal document say? The legal document says 1.25. But the credit criteria calls for, if you want an A rating, behave like one. If you want to be good, if you want to be a good creditor out there and expected to be perceived as someone that has the ability to pay back his debt, you better have coverages of over 2%. So when you look at 2012 and the budget shows 173 times coverage, we bring those numbers, we give those numbers to the rating agencies up in New York, they see that, and they know that historically, like at the city, your budgets are very conservative. And that at the end of the day, at the end of the year, that coverage is going to be greater than the budget at 173. So when I go about showing you that coverage, what makes the coverage go up or down is two things, mainly. It's got to do with your gross revenues of $180 million. And then there's a line item in there that says total debt service requirements. You see how it shows $22,926,000 in 2012? That's the total mortgage payment of the PUB, $22.9 million. Well, when you go over to the page that we were in, the CIP, which is page 6, if they're showing you they're going to borrow money, $100 million over the next 5 years, and they need to borrow this, but 66 is for electric plants, $8.6 million for water, almost $25 million for sewer. $100 million today, if you go to the market and borrow over 30 years, the mortgage payment is about $8 million. So instead of having a $23 million payment, now you're going to have a $31 million payment. Whoa. What is that going to do to our coverages? Our coverages are probably going to be affected. So you can't just expect to have the PUB go out and borrow money. That's why it is in the contract with the citizens of Brownsville that when they borrow money, you better know. But when you go from $23 million to $31 million in mortgage payments, you better know. Well, they're not going to do it overnight. They're not going to do it in the next year. In fact, if you go over to the next quadrant, it says, how is the funding of debt going to be anticipated? You got debt funding in 2012 of $19,362,000, and then $29,695,000 in 13. So it's a very systematic way of borrowing for money. And contrary to the city, the PUB has an instrument called commercial paper, which is like a credit card. Today, the city of Brownsville's PUB can borrow money with this credit card at a rate of almost, what, 115? 33 basis points. Well, the liquidity fee, how much is that? 75? Okay, so then it's 180. So 108. So basically, today, the PUB, if they need $19 million, they don't even have to come to you. They just use this credit card, put it in there, and they pay 108. That credit card today has a capacity of only $30 million. They have $20 million that they've used out of the 50. And at some point either during this year or maybe next year, very likely next year, we'll borrow 20 or 30 so that we can continue to have the credit card of $50 million that the city commission gave to the PUB. Why? So they can stay flexible, so they can go out and access the markets whenever there are opportunities like buying an additional capacity to one of the most efficient plants out there called the Oakland Union, right? So basically, if not for that commercial paper, they wouldn't be able to seize on the spot to go buy assets that will be of great value to the city, and that's what the PUB does. So going back to telling you, how is it that the PUB operates in doing their capital projects? That's $70 million of cash. I'm going back now to the left side on the sources. It says cash, electric 32, water 4, sewer 24, $70 million. When I tell you that you got to have this coverage, well, if they only pay $23 million and they're covering that 2 to 1, what happens to the other 23? Well, they have a capital improvement fund, right? You know what we call it? That capital improvement fund is what gives us the cash to go make improvements with cash instead of borrowing money. So when we did this major restructuring back in 2005, one of the concerns we had about the system was that the system had no cash in reserves, no cash like we do in the fund balance. A lot of it was on the capital improvement fund. So what we did a restructuring to ensure that we could push as much cash into the system so that in case of an act of God, in the case that the ratepayer couldn't pay, we would have this cash come in to make those payments. Today, we're capturing that cash in that capital improvement fund. So when the PUB staff tells us we need $100 million in loans to fulfill a $200 million 5-year CIP, we don't know if we need $100 million. We may need less than $100 million. We may need 70. We may need 80. But those are very uncertain numbers just yet. I can't give you with conviction, and you can't expect your staff to give you with conviction what that number, or certainty, what that number is going to be. What we do need to have with conviction is rates. We need to have things that make sense. So if you go over page 7, this is the history since 1990 on the left-hand side of property tax rates. And on the right-hand side, I didn't want to give you the PUB rates because you really will fall asleep. And all I gave you there was the history of rate increases of the PUB. On the left-hand side, look at the fourth column from left to right. That's what's important to you as a city commissioner and mayor and everybody around us. In 1990, the tax rate used to be 75 cents. In 1991, 92, we had a referendum where basically we asked the taxpayer, in lieu of us collecting a penny of a cent sales tax, we would reduce the property tax rate. So we went from 75 cents in 92 to 65 cents in 93. That's because we reallocated 1 penny of sales tax to our budget. That's what goes into our general fund budget for operations. Well, if you start in 93, we pretty much have been at 65 cents for the last, 20 years. In some instances, we've gone up to 68.5 cents, and that's as much as we've gone back in 01. So as you can see, the city has done a very responsible, has had in the eyes of the investor and the creditor or the rating agencies, they see you as someone who's very steady. There are no surprises. Despite the fact that you've been growing at 10% down here with all sorts of needs, you've been very consistent and very responsible, and that's there. Numbers don't lie. We say that all the time. And your fund balances, when we go back to that page 4, your bottom line has always been very steady at between 15 to 25%. The problem today is that fund balance, that bottom line, when you have a chance to look at it a little closer, you've now been trending downwards. And when you trend downwards, the investor, the fellow who lends you money, gets a little nervous. What's even more important is, look at what you did for the PUB. On the PUB side, back in 1990, you gave a water and sewer, water and wastewater, rate increase of 36% and 21%. And then the commission didn't do anything for 5 years. And then they gave 4% increases to the PUB for 6 consecutive years. And then nothing in '01, then a little bit more from '02 through '06, and then nothing for 5 years. In fact, last year, the commission gave the board the authority to go out and raise electric, water, and sewer 5%. The board just acted upon those rate increases last summer by 5% across the board. This is after having had no increases in 5 years. Well, I'm going to tell you a story. San Antonio CPS, City of Laredo, Texas, where we represent both, City of Dallas, they have rate increases of 2 to 3% annually. Come hell or high water, you get a 3% increase. It's better to get a 3% increase every year than getting to react in a very probably negative environment, political environment, because this is about politics too. I mean, anything you do carries an effect on the political aspect of your actions. So, or your actions create a political, well, you know what I'm saying. But in any event, if you do a 2 or 3% annual increase, the ratepayer is gonna have a better feel for that than if you gave them a 36% water increase or 21% increase. So that's why I bring this history to you, because you can't know about yourself if you don't know who you are. So this is who you are. This is what you've done. So when you go to the PUB board members, if you put them on there, is so that they can be vigilant on how the staff operates the system, but most importantly, how they can come to you for help when they need the help. I personally wish that the PUB had an ordinance adopted by you where you would give them, based on professional advice, increases of 2 or 3% a year, because that's the thing to do. I don't know if that's achievable or not, but I just wanted to put that in there, okay? What's important is that on the left-hand side, the total tax rate, the fourth column, 6576. I haven't really spoken to Mr. Cavler or Mr. Gonzalez, but I understand that the commission has been brought up with a budget that maybe requires a 4% tax rate increase or whatever. I've always said to people, and I guess you only get this when you've been in the business a while, budgets are a management tool. And if I'm gonna ask my ratepayer, my taxpayer to put more, we gotta be very good at making sure that we understand the budgets. And that's what we're trying to do today. I hope that by the time I'm done here in about 3 minutes, that you walk away with a better knowledge of how this big picture operates, how it works. At the end of the day, if you go over to page 10, on the bottom quadrant, the city has a system that is very good for the city, has been very good for the city. People need to understand and appreciate how Brownsville, Texas, when you go back to 2002, the combined monthly water, wastewater, and electric bill was about $127. Today it's at $157. That's a $30 increase over the last 10 years. Look how it compares to other cities, San Benito, Harlingen, McAllen, Edinburgh. You're right below that. You did that. The commission did that. And that's your history. And I can tell you two things that you need to value and that the taxpayer needs to value, is that if they were to be very offended by how much the PUB charges them, they always have a platform to come and protest, and that's you, the city commission. That's why the city commission needs to know what the PUB board does. Because the taxpayer, the ratepayer, can only come to one place and protest, and that is right here on this floor. What chances does that ratepayer have to protest what CP&L or what a private utility company does in other parts of the valley? I can tell you they don't have anything. They can only go, I believe, to the Texas Public Utility Commission, right? To complain in Austin, Texas. I mean, whatever they're going to spend on their car to go up there, they'd rather just keep it and keep paying that bill. And that's, I think, the beauty. You have made the city so competitive. And again, I just wanted to close on that, in that this was what we were trying to achieve, give you that overview. People do come to you and tell you, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you borrowing money? we are keeping an eye for you. We've been very honored representing the city for many, many years, and we continue to working with you. So any questions? Here we are.
Very good presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
According to our legal counsel, I need to call our side of the meeting to order.
Retroactively.
Yes, retroactive, thank you.
Okay. Pete, next.
Bill number 2. Number 2 and 1 were together. I had a PowerPoint presentation, but I think you covered most of it. There are some differences, but they're all the estimates. I mean, I don't know, I can go over it real quick, what I have on my PowerPoint presentation.
Unless,
But it's,
unless there's something different, I think it was, and I don't mean to rush anyone, but I do have a 1 o'clock speaking engagement. So if, in other words, what I wanted to do is make sure that the public as well as both boards understood the nature of the beast, if you would.
right.
Is there something we need to add?
Well, maybe that the PUB board needs to know some numbers that we have. I mean, we all know that we're all going through a very tough situation right now, economically, recessions, what we've gone through, what we have done. I'm going to go very quickly. This is our budget. We show a different number than Mr. Hinojosa. And again, this is a conservative number, but it's still something that I, for example, has a concern with our budget going forward, the way we have it right now. This particular budget, and I'm looking at the proposed after budget cuts, does not include the 4-cent increase that we are proposing. So if we include the 4 cents that the City Commission has to look at, hopefully by next Monday, that will definitely narrow the gap. Right now we show 2.3 million shortfall. If we can get the 4 cents, then we'll be very close to balancing the budget. And this is something that the City Commission has already made. We've already made presentations to them, just for the PUB board will understand this. Our estimate fund balance, obviously we have a different number than what Mr. Hinojosa says. I'm sticking with this one, 8.5 million, maybe 9 million. Again, they're all estimates, and we don't know the numbers until the audit is processed. Looking at the reserves that we've had for the last few years, yes, we've had some strong years, like for instance 2006. We had 24.5%, not 28%, but 24, which is close to the 28. It's 24. That's the highest we've been as far as reserves. We ended the year 2010 with still a strong number of 16.63%. I think that the recommended amount is around 15%, or about 60 days of operations that you should have in reserves. Obviously, our number for 2011 is below the 15% that we have certainly recommended. And this is something that the rating agencies, when we visit the rating agencies, they want strong fund balances, and that's the reason why our rating has shown increases. This is just the entire budget, 123 million. And again, we do have a reserve fund balance for debt service, and this is to take care of our debt. And this is money that our outstanding debt versus the money that's supported by other means besides property taxes. What are the debt that the city has issued the last few years? We had 0 in 2005, 9, and 10, and then we just issued 5.5 million in 2011. One of the areas that we want to look that certainly we want to look at here is the tax rate. The tax rate is at 66.0262, which is a little bit higher than what we had at the beginning of the year at 66. And this is based on the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate is the rate that that calculates the same number of revenues that you received the prior year, and that's what it's a formula that we applied. On the right-hand side at the bottom shows you the distribution between the M&O and the debt service. And debt service, we have maintained it at 27 cents. When we issued the $5.5 million in 2011, we told the City Commission that we were going to maintain the same debt service rate of 27 cents, which we did. If you look to the left-hand side on the very bottom, we stay with the debt service rate of 27 cents. But you can see that that this particular schedule shows a 4-cent increase, meaning that's the rollback tax rate. That's the highest tax rate that the city can actually adopt without going through any voter approval. Again, we are asking the City Commission to go with that 4-cent increase. It's about at 6.11% based from the effective rate that we have right now. And this is something that we've covered with the City Commission, how much of a half penny will generate if we increase the tax rate. And again, it's if you go all the way to the rollback rate, you generate $2 million. And these are the percentage increases, 6.11%. One of the areas that we always look at very closely is to make sure we have reserves for any anticipated expenses that were not covered in the budget, unexpected. And one of the areas that we always point out is hurricanes. In 2008, we had a hurricane that obviously FEMA does not reimburse for every expense that we have. So we had to come up with $1.2 million out of our fund balance to cover that storm way back in 2008. And one of the areas that we've talked about is right now we have a shortfall of $2.3 million. We have already reduced our expenses by 1.3. There is a cost of living adjustment, or actually an agreement between the unions and the city on a 3% increase beginning fiscal year 2012. It goes all the way to 2014. It's approximately $645,000 additional monies that are needed. And this does not include the fire department. We're still on negotiations. And again, another area that we had concerns with was the transit system, beginning with the population census numbers. If we go over the 200,000, not only the city but also include a rural portion, the Department of Transportation will not be funding us for the operations of bus. So it's something that we need to look at very closely in the immediate future. Of course, we are very thankful for the assistance that the PUB has given us for 2010, 2011. Close to those, if you add those two, the 5.5 and the 1.6, you're closer to $7 million that we have received in additional funds from the Brownsville PUB during 2010 and 2011. Again, sales tax is still it's still above. We're budgeting a little almost to 3% 2011, but it's still below the 2008 numbers. 2008 numbers, we had a very strong year, 25 million. Obviously, the recession has definitely hit us. Another area is the bridge, and that's a chart that really hurts us here. The bridge funds that we get, and those are not there anymore. Levies, we've been steady throughout the year. Building permits is steady again, and really, it's very quickly. We've got some obviously issues that we need to resolve between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Right. I think, and I know Noe would like to say a couple more words, but for the joint board, basically, the revenues, as you have seen them, the bridge revenues have fallen, the sales tax revenues have fallen, so we're having a shortfall. Although I would tell the Joint Commission that the board will be looking at that tax rate. We've had 2 public hearings on that, and we do appreciate all that PUB has done for the city. And by the same token, the PUB needs to be autonomous in its own way, and I commend them for the job that they're doing, and the entire board, because I think that it's a great ally to us on behalf of the city. But I think we should also look in the future, Noe, if you so suggested, is we might take a look at that percentage for future reference. We also need to take a look at the usage that we have as to whether there might be some sort of
ability to work with that, the number that the utilities number, so that we won't face this situation on an annual basis?
Yes, sir. In fact, if you just go page 4 real quickly on my presentation, and what costs, page 4, what's caused a little bit of a challenge here for all of us is that, well, first of all, in order to change the 10 to the 14% or whatever percent, I think we're going to have an opportunity to do that on or about 2015, when the bonds of 05 become callable. We can then, at that time, make those changes. So we got 3 years to work with. That if you want it sooner, it's going to be very difficult because the credit, we're going to have to talk about it, but we'll talk about it at another time.
I think it goes in conjunction with our city commission here that we have to have a 5-year plan. And so we have to incorporate it somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
But perhaps in between time, if our stream of revenue does not increase as we hope it will, but we'd like to kind of figure out how we can also work with the PUB rates for the city itself, if we are able to do that, so that it's sort of counterproductive in some ways. You're taking it out of the left hand to put, or the left pocket to put it in the right pocket. And I understand for accounting purposes how that's important, but I think what is really most important is the communication that we have and the understanding of how this whole system works.
And in order to take from the left or the right, we need to put more on the left or the right. Right?
Right. I guess I'll entertain questions from the
Sure.
board. Mr. Nájera?
Yeah, just to mention something.
Yes, sir.
You know, that revenue, as far as 10%, you're talking 10,924,000.
Yes.
For the year. If you raise it from 10% to 13%, which is only 3%, but in essence, you know, at the end of the year, you have $3,277,000. Okay, $3,277,000, which really, it sounds 10%, 13%, but in net revenue, when you take the 3 million into the 10 million, it's 30% of, in other words, just like a 30% raise.
Without question. I mean,
Yes,
in fact,
that
if you go
equates, you
look
know,
at,
it doesn't, you know, sound.
if today you have $100 million
Mhm.
of the adjusted gross revenues, and they get 10%, that's $10 million.
Exactly.
If that number of 10% would not be 10%, it would be 14%, let's say. That would be $14 million transferred instead of a $10 million. What does that do? It takes away from them paying cash for capital projects. Now, what I think is important is that if we give you a 2 or 3% increase on an annual basis, then it gives you the ability to keep your revenues in the fund, and you're able to give more to the city.
Yeah,
And those are the
just
things that we'll be exploring with staff. One of the things that brings us today, and why this is so crucial, if you look at the column 2011, I have in there actual. At the bottom line for the city, I say 12,969,000. When Mr. Gonzalez comes to you, he's telling you, you're telling us what, 10 million?
Not less than that.
7 million? Just tell me what the number is.
It's a couple $1 million difference.
It's a couple of $1 million difference, and it's based on two things. One is my projected revenues, which we don't know for the city, of 82.6 million, but last year we did 89 million. I mean, the PUB transfer, for example, it shows 8,650,000. If we get the 10.9 million, like the staff has already told me you will get it, that's a 2.3 million difference right there. So I know that the 2011 number is not going to be my number of 12.9 million. I think it's going to be better than the 12.9 million that I'm giving you. But then there are some extraordinary events that occurred this year that I can keep an eye on. Like, for example, if you look at the lines of expenses, general government is 12.3 million, public safety 49 million. Look at public safety. I show you 49.8 million. In years past, it's 52.4 million. Today, that is a challenge for the City Commission. That public safety number is a challenge. You cannot, and I warn you because it's going across everywhere in this country, be aware of the word unsustainable. Payroll, overtime, benefits. Those things do impact cities. And I don't want to have, personally, I wouldn't come here before you and tell you that PUB is supposed to be there to help you with that. What PUB is looked at by investors very, very differently they do on you. The PUB has to perform on actual events as it pertains to providing electricity, water, and sewer. They're subjected annually, unlike the City Commission. So again, Those were the big differences. When you see the bottom line for me on 2012, I'm telling you 10,600,000. Mr. Gonzalez showed you already $3 million. Well, I can tell you in 2 years from now, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be here. Well, if he gets to 3 million, none of us are going to be here, I don't think. But our point is, in working with Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Calver, is to make sure you don't get to a $7 million fund balance or a $3 million fund balance. That's what we try to avoid. But that's why budgets are so important that you all understand. So when he tells you I need 3 cents or 4 cents of a tax rate increase, he's going to need some help there. But I think if we get some help from PUB with the way we budget for PUB revenues and expenses, and I've talked to staff about that, we don't have to get that much of an increase either. So we have to give and take a little bit. But what I want to share with you is that PUB, as far as I'm concerned, they've done always the right thing. And when you ask them, the question is, do we know what to ask them? And that's what we need to make sure that we make it very clear so that.
I think everybody's got a pretty good idea. And like I said, I don't mean to cut anybody short, but this meeting at 11:30 was called after I had already had some commitments. And unless, we find out differently, does everybody get a pretty good picture of what we got here? Is there any action item, Pete? There's no action items that have to be taken?
Well, number 3,
Well, it's got discussion and possible action, but at this particular point, I would suspect that the PUB board knows exactly where we stand. We've got a shortfall of 2.3. The commission knows where we stand. We've got to take a look at, and we'll have a meeting tomorrow. Is that the day that we vote on whether there's a tax increase?
No, sir, it's the 19th.
The 19th. We have to the 19th to figure that out because we have to get our budget in our house in order as well as a budget for the PUB. Does anyone have any other further questions?
So let me see if I understand the intention of the workshop is to let us know of the shortfall and for us at the board to entertain the shortfall. Is that what is?
Well, I think that the nature of the meeting today was to allow us both to communicate, to allow us to know where we're at, and depending on the action of the commission, what they decide would be they have the ability to go back to the PUB board, and if we need to request some funds, that would be it.
I believe they vote on their budget tonight.
We've had several budget workshops, and we're still in the budget workshop process. I think we have the same timeline, which is at the 30th. Is when
I think it was supposed to be.
Well, except for today, but it can be tabled, so, that's.
Mr. Hinojosa, I do have a question, and this is really for Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Leandro, and the whole group. Okay, so I'm a little slow, so I apologize up front. It appears that the numbers that you all have estimated at the City of Brownsville versus what PUB in the transfer are off, correct? I mean, to some degree, right?
Yeah, we have not adjusted the money, the additional monies that Mr. Garcia gave me earlier, like sometime this year. But there are some expenses that we see. We are exceeding some of the budget expenses in some areas. And we also have a liability, a potential liability that's out there that has not been recorded yet in our books. There hasn't. So looking at the bottom line, I'm just looking at the bottom line, not necessarily line item by line item. You are correct. We still need to adjust the revenue that we anticipate from getting from the PUB as a cash transfer for this year. But at the same time, I would have to go look at the other expenditures that are potential expenditure that's coming out that has not been budgeted for. So it evens out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, and I invite anybody to discuss. You're totally correct, Oscar. You're not slow. They have two different numbers that, well, maybe you are. No, I'm just they have two different numbers of the way they look at it, but as you well know, Mr. Gonzalez is extremely conservative and likes to make sure that he has adequate funds at all times. So, but I do invite you all to discuss it, not in a quorum form. Anybody have a motion to adjourn jointly?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Dick.
Are we adjourned?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.